Do you go to church?
No, not usually.
No, I do not.
Not as much as I used to tell you the truth.
Did you used to go to church?
At one point in time, yeah, when I was little.
I go to church like Christmas, Easter.
I think that you can also still believe in God and not have to go to church.
Why don't you go to church now?
Because I went to church probably too much when I was a kid.
Why don't you go to church?
I'm usually hungover on Sundays.
I work on Sundays. I don't have time.
What's keeping you from going now?
Just not my thing.
I believe in more of like a spiritual one-on-one relationship with God.
There's not really a religion that I found that I really felt connected to.
I don't feel like it really gives me a lot in this day and age. I have too many other worries. It's kind of a time commitment as well.
For me, like I think it just works better just to do my own kind of thing.
I find God's church very hypocritical, so therefore I find God hypocritical at the same time.
I'm not saying it doesn't serve other people's needs, but it doesn't serve mine.
Expectations people don't live up to, and it's just kind of a crowd that I usually don't like to be around.
Do you know a lot of people who go to church?
Yes.
Does it look like that makes a difference in their lives?
No.
Do you think church is relevant today?
It depends, I think.
I believe it is. It's more, I think for older people and more mature people, actually.
Well, actually, the churches that I've gone to, they normally don't address topics that are dealing directly with me.
Sometimes I go to church and I feel like it's not something I can relate to.
And then some of the times when they address topics that do deal with things that I encounter in everyday life, they just kind of touch on it and then move on to the next thing.
Where the Bible's taught, I believe that it can be worked into today's issues and the world around us.
Do you think there's anything a church could do to make itself more relevant to you?
That's a good question.
I have no idea. I don't think I'd go anyway.
Do you believe that there's anything a church could do to make itself relevant to you?
Not really. I don't feel like you have to go to church to be a good person, sort of where I stand on that.
Just being more flexible and willing to understand that people are people and we do make mistakes and that's just the way it is. There shouldn't be any judgment. It should just be that support group.
Somehow try to make things a little bit more adaptable and adapted to today's needs and today's, I guess, apprehensions for such an unsteady and scary world that we live in.
Do you go to church?
Yes, I do.
Why do you believe it's important to go to church?
It's changed my life completely, from someone who was hopeless, had no idea about purpose, was desperate to know what my destiny and purpose was, and it's brought me to a place where I'm growing every day. Church has been something that I may not even be alive today if it wasn't for church.
The video that you just saw was taken, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. And you get an idea of how some of the younger people feel about church. And the statistics then and now, I'm sure even higher, say that about 70% of people believe that the church is irrelevant to their lives, irrelevant to how they live day to day and practice their beliefs, their journey on their daily walk. They just believe that the church is irrelevant. 70%. As a result, we see a huge gap between the older generations that are in a worship service, and we look and we don't see the younger generations or the generation after that. And what's happened is that the church has gotten to a place where it's just beginning to age and die out. Now, as Aldersgate Church, we have been very good about outreach, about inviting people into a relationship with us as a church, about serving the needs of people in our community, We've been good about inviting people to worship, to just witness how we worship this God that we love, and to hear the gospel. We've been good about inviting people on a one-to-one relationship to seek out opportunities, to invite somebody to become a follower of Jesus Christ. Seeing the little response, seeing little fruit from all that can be very discouraging. It can lead us as a church to a point where we can believe that we are now powerless. But we would be believing a lie. Today and next week, we'll be looking at a sermon series entitled, Why Church? Why is the church still relevant for the world today? Why is the church still important in the lives of every person in every generation? Why church? I want us to explore reasons why that church is still truly powerful, not powerless. Listen as I read from the Apostle Paul writing to the church in Corinth. And he says these words found in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 18 to 20. God has given us, he's talking about the church, God has given us this task of reconciling people to him. For God was in Christ reconciling the world to himself, no longer counting people's sins against them. And he gave us, again talking about the church, he gave us the wonderful message of reconciliation. So we are Christ's ambassadors. God is making his appeal through us. We speak for Christ when we plead, come back to God. Notice what this passage says over and over in just a few verses. The passage is pointing out to us that we, the church, have been given this task to invite people back to God. It is we that God gave us this message of reconciliation. It is we who are Christ's ambassadors. It is the church that makes his appeal, that God is making his appeal through us, the church. We are the ones that speak for Christ. This passage is full of pointing to the church and its power and its validity, its importance. Because what this means is that God has empowered us as his rescue plan for the entire world. That is his plan A, and there is no plan B. God has left it up to the church to be the one responsible for bringing the message, the good news of Jesus Christ to an entire world, to offer salvation, to offer the opportunity to be reconciled to God. Why church? Because it is God's only plan for the salvation of the world. We are the ones that offer people an escape from hell and receive heaven. We are the people who have the opportunity to be reconciled to God. We are the people to live a life and offer that same life to others with God's presence and God's purpose and God's power. Yes, the church is imperfect, but the church is not ineffective. Why church? Because God is the master craftsman, and he chooses imperfect tools in his perfect hand. Our confidence is in God working through us. In Matthew chapter 28, verses 18 and 20, we read what's called the Great Commission. It's important for all of us to remind ourselves of the central reason the church exists. Listen, as I read this familiar passage. Jesus told his disciples, I have all authority in heaven and on earth. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, and be sure of this, I am with you always. Now think about what this passage is saying. God is telling us through Jesus that Jesus has all authority of heaven and earth. He has complete power, all that authority, all that power. Then he says to the church, go and make disciples. And be sure of this, I am with you. What he's saying is that I, the one that has all authority of heaven and earth, are sending you, but I am going with you to make disciples. It means we have this tremendous power of all authority of heaven and earth working through us as we go to make disciples. You, as part of the church, you are authorized and deputized to represent Jesus to the world. You have the promise of his power at work through you. Your faith, and this is important, your faith in that promise is like a light switch to that power. We are already, when we became followers of Jesus Christ, we were already plugged into the power. We just need to turn the light switch on, and that accesses that power working through us, and that light switch is our faith in that. The faith in the promise that God says, I'm with you. I got your back. I am working through you. The question is, do you believe it? Because that is the switch that turns everything on. Why do you see in the churches today, why do we see little results? There are two reasons that are possible why we're seeing a missing 2 generations in our church today. One is that the church is not inviting people to follow Jesus Christ. If we're not doing what God calls us to do, then we're failing at the mission that God is sending us, and there's no power transfer, there's no display. God's plan A is not being put into effect. The world is seeking, maybe even looking for hope. But if we don't offer that hope to them, we are the ones at fault. But there's a second reason. The church can be out there inviting people to come and be followers of Jesus Christ, but those people are refusing to accept that. Refusing to accept the forgiveness of Jesus Christ. Refusing to accept the gift of his unconditional love. Refusing to accept his power, his mercy. God gives every single person the freedom to receive Jesus Christ or to reject him. So it's not God's responsibility if they say no. It is not our responsibility if they say thanks but no thanks. If every person we invite to follow Jesus says, no, I don't want it, we are still successful because we are the ones to simply offer the opportunity, to offer the invitation. Inviting someone to trust in Jesus Christ can be scary. So lean on God's presence with us. Put all your weight, that's like putting all your weight on to a railing or a chair or a table or anything that you trust will hold you. Put all your weight, lean on God's presence with you. Lean on God's power working through you. Lean on God's wisdom to guide you through. You are inviting people. Think about this. You're inviting people to be reconciled to God, to be forgiven of all their sins. You're inviting them to receive God's perfect love, His complete power, and His direction for our lives. And you're not responsible for how they respond. So, turn on the light switch of faith. Place your confidence, your complete trust and confidence in what God is doing through you. Be confident in that power that's accessible to you if you just turn on the switch of faith. It is not self-confidence, it is God confidence. And that makes all the difference. It is a confidence that you can do all things through Christ who gives us the strength. God can use you. God can use all of us as a church working together to make an eternal difference in our world around us, in individual lives that cross our paths. We have that opportunity that lies right in front of us every single day. We need to hold on to that confidence that God is working through us. And that's what gives us the courage to step forward and invite people to follow Jesus. That is why the church is so important even today and will be tomorrow and to the end of time. May God grant that for each and every one of us. Amen.